The Holy Gospel according to John. Glory to you, O Lord. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify to the light so that all might believe through him. He himself was not the light, but he came to testify to the light. This is the testimony given by John when the Jews sent priests and Levites from Jerusalem to ask him, "Who are you?" He confessed and did not deny it, but confessed, "I am not the Messiah." And they asked him, "What then? Are you Elijah?" He said, "No, I am not." "Are you the prophet?" He answered, "No." Then they said to him, "Who are you? Let us have an answer for those who sent us. What do you say about yourself?" He said, "I am the voice of one crying out in the wilderness, 'Make straight the way of the Lord,' as the prophet Isaiah said." Now they had been sent from the Pharisees. They asked him, "Why then are you baptizing, if you are neither the Messiah, nor Elijah, nor the prophet?" John answered them, "I baptize with water. Among you stands one whom you do not know, the one who is coming after me. I'm not worthy to untie the thong of his sandal." This took place in Bethany across the Jordan, where John was baptizing. The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. God's grace and peace be with you. As we come into this third Sunday in the season of Advent, we are brought face to face with John the Baptizer and his testifying. In our tradition, for many who have come to the Lutheran faith out of a Northern European tradition, the idea of testifying is not something that we are as familiar with as some of our brothers and sisters from other parts of the world. Some Lutherans are very used to the form of testifying as giving witness and praise to God, but others are a lot less familiar and a lot less comfortable with this whole thing of testifying. But it's important. And that's why it has its position in this Sunday, in this season of preparation. John is here to testify. Now, there are some things about John's experience that I think are really helpful for us to remember. I know that they are important for me to remember, because if somebody is trying to figure out how important I am, I gotta confess, my tendency is, if I'm not the important person that people are gonna be impressed with, I wanna find some really good connection that brings me close to that impressive person so that people will be impressed with me too. John didn't do this. I mean, had I been in John's place, I have to tell you, had I been in John's place and someone said, "Are you the Messiah?" he would say, "I'm his cousin." But John didn't do that. All he did was again and again and again say, "No, no, I am not the one you're looking for." And that is part of his testimony, is that he constantly deflects off of himself in order to point to Jesus. Even when they say, "What do you have to say for yourself?" he doesn't say anything about himself. He again takes that and points it back to Jesus. "I'm the one crying out in the wilderness, 'Prepare the way of the Lord.'" It doesn't say much about him at all. That is as foreign to many of us as any idea of standing up in church and telling our stories in front of a lot of people we don't know. But the point of testimony isn't just to tell our stories. The point of testimony is to just say just enough to help people understand not what we have done, but to understand what God has done. And testimony is not about making people impressed with us or hoping that people will come to admire us for all we've done. Testimony is meant to stand up and say, in the middle of a difficult and dark place in my life, this is what God has done. Testimony points away from ourselves, through ourselves, to Jesus. That in our culture is, again, counterintuitive as well as countercultural. Very few of us will stand up and share the most difficult places in our lives. Very few of us really want to talk about where we had nothing and no one but God to hold on to. No one wants to talk about how difficult and weak and broken our lives can be. But that's where testimony lifts up the wonder and the joy and the glory of what God has done for us. When John was preaching, he didn't have a high status in the community. He did have crowds of people coming out to him, but even that is not something that he referred back to. And really, his status was quite low when you looked at the grand picture of things. He wasn't in fancy palaces. He didn't have political power. He didn't have wealth. He didn't have the respect of the powers and the structures and the systems that oversaw the life of all the community. All he had was a voice pointing to Jesus. And that's all that testimony is. As we move through this Advent season of waiting, it's a good thing for us to remember about testimony, to think about what it means to testify to Jesus. Beloved, you don't have to impress anyone with how well you have managed your life or how much God has blessed you. You don't have to impress anyone with how much you have done for Jesus or how strong your faith is or how deep your theological understanding is. That's not what it is to testify. But to talk about how God has held you up as you struggled with addiction, with money management, with stress in your job, with broken family relationships, to talk about how God has held you up when you have suffered under the oppressive weight of injustice, when you have been overwhelmed with the necessities and responsibilities of caring for other people in times that would try anyone's soul, when you have been at your weakest. Sometimes that's the best time to testify, because it's not about you. It's not about how good you are or how much wisdom you have to share. But testifying is just pointing to Jesus, who is good and who brings us hope. In these cold days of waiting and longing, there are many things that continue to weigh us down, beloved. We are tired. But just because we're tired doesn't mean we don't have anything to testify. Because Christ comes to us as he has come for 2,000 years to people who have been waiting and longing for things to get better, who have been hoping for the possibility of a new tomorrow, who have been praying to be released from the weights of injustice and oppression and illness and poverty and all kinds of struggles, for people who have been longing to be released from the burden of our own sins. Jesus comes to us. And as we testify, as we remember that the point is not to build ourselves up, to lift ourselves up, but to point people to the self-giving love of Jesus and the power and might that comes through one who died so that life could rise up out of that brokenness. That power comes forth in our testimony as hope for the world. We testify in all kinds of ways, just like John, by talking about the promise of Jesus that has come to us, especially in the hurting and small and broken places of our lives. We testify to Jesus in our insistence that human structures that have oppressed and wounded people can be changed. We testify in our ability and our willingness to say, I'm not anything special. I'm not perfect. I'm not a particularly good Christian. I'm not a particularly marvelous person. I struggle just like you, but Jesus is good to me. We testify sometimes more out of our pain and brokenness than we ever can out of our accomplishments and our strengths. So if you're feeling tired in this third week of Advent, as the days get shorter and the cold grows deeper, if you're feeling tired with the new news of the pandemic and political controversies that continue to swirl, if you're feeling tired by the ongoing pain and violence and brokenness in the world, remember that there is a testimony that is for you, but can also be from you, to point to one who brings us hope. Jesus is faithful in coming again anew every year. And while we're waiting to experience that renewal, we know that he's also with us to give us strength. He was with John. He'll be with Mary next week. He will be with us. And whether or not we have the kind of Christmas service that we've always loved in the past, that will not change his coming one iota. The one who comes to be born into this small, weak human frame comes to bring life for all of us. We wait and we hope, but beloved, don't forget to testify. Thanks be to God. Amen.